hope everybody is staying well. It was a shockingly nice day here in Ireland, so I hope it's sunny and warm where you are too. So today we're going to look at the concept, another, I suppose, key stone to how to edit Wikipedia, which is the fact that Wikipedia doesn't contain original research. And this can be the source of a certain amount of ire for new editors, especially when they're writing about niche or emerging topics. Because quite often some of the sources or a lot of the sources that might be available to them will be referred to as primary or original source material. Within the context of Wikipedia and why it doesn't allow original research is fundamental to the fact that it is an encyclopedia. So if you think back, if you're old enough to remember, like I am, paper encyclopedias, you never got new ideas and new research and new information within the encyclopedia. It is a body of established knowledge and established generally over the course of years rather than days or weeks. And the only thing that separates, I suppose, Wikipedia from encyclopedia is who writes it. In that encyclopedias obviously employed people to write the articles within it, but also that Wikipedia doesn't have to worry about how big it is. Obviously, going back to when you would buy a paper encyclopedia, you had to be quite concerned if you were producing it in how big it was, so that it didn't become so large and so expensive that nobody could buy it. So you had to be quite concise and perhaps not include an awful lot of more niche or minority topics, regardless of whether or not they were important to human knowledge, just to keep things short and concise and to maintain just the highlights, I suppose, of human knowledge and very much, I suppose, white Western human knowledge at that. So, no original research. You can see this again. This is the page to go to, much like the one we were looking at last week for tone, is that there is this page where you could, if you are ever unsure about exactly what the boundaries of what original research is and things like that, this is the page to go to. So we're not publishing original thought. So if I am the first person to discover a particular fact, i.e., the day somebody was born, if it was unknown up to this point, or if the issues around it were murky, how somebody died, I found the death certificate or something like that, Wikipedia is not the place for that to be published for the first time. If I am interested in the wider ecosystem that then might see that information published on Wikipedia, I would look to getting that fact published somewhere. When it comes to how that information then gets onto Wikipedia, I, as the originator of that original research, can't be the one that then puts it onto Wikipedia because I have a bias. I have an interest in getting that information on there. So what this feeds back into is the fact that Wikipedia wants reliable, published, attributable, so citable sources. We want to know where the information is coming from where it was published, who was written by, and all of this feeds back into also verifiability, that somebody else can double check when I cite something, the ability for somebody to double check my work to make sure that I'm not being disingenuous or made an error in how I'm reporting the information from a particular source. So once again, we're going to look at an example. And once again, we're going to look at the biography of an Irish woman. I'm nothing if not predictable in this. And you can see that this is a woman called Nellie Cashman. And it has what's referred to as a maintenance tag. So any amount of reading on Wikipedia, you'll become quite familiar with these over time. There's various different maintenance tags for various different issues. Quite often it'll say things like lack of inline citations, which means that you might have a list of references at the end, but you don't know from where a certain piece of information came from because they're not cited within the body of the text. So you don't know what facts came from where. Sometimes you'll have a tag that says promotional material. This is written in a promotional tone. Quite often that happens with, I suppose, events, festivals, businesses, because the language, the tone, as we were talking about the last time, is promotional. It's not neutral. It's making this company out to be fantastic and wonderful, that kind of thing. So this one is for original research, and as you can see, maintenance tags are dated, so any individual editor can tag an article as having an issue in it. And you can see this one goes back quite a while, so February 2013, so over 7 years ago now. So it's not a recent issue that this article has. And what's interesting about this, if we take a look at the history of the article, so you can see we have all of our tabs up here, we have our edit button, but we have view history, which means that we can look at every single version of the page that's existed over time. So I made an edit to this 2 days ago now. Just a little bit of, there was a few kind of misformatted citations and things like that. So it's just very small tweaks that I was making. But you can see that this page, so if we look at the oldest versions of it, this article was first published in 2014, so 16 years ago, almost 16 years ago. And at the time, as far as I can tell, there wasn't a huge amount available about Nellie Cashman. She's kind of come to prominence in recent years with a few kind of women in history, especially Irish women in history initiatives that there have been in Ireland and in Canada and in America, where she spent most of her life. So in 2014, there probably would have been very few resources about her, and people were kind of, I suppose, scrounging around for information about her. So at first, there might have been quite a lot of original research. So the person who wrote that article or edited that article in the meantime may have added pieces of information that they had found from primary source materials. So we're talking about, as I said, birth records, death records, archival material, probably not in the case of Nellie, but perhaps in more contemporary people, interviews with them, where it's not an interpreted interview, it's just a bare sound file or a text file. But equally, somebody's autobiography is also a primary source. Ideally, you would be looking for somebody who's writing a biography about somebody, and I suppose is a respected or competent biographer. So here, 7 years old, there has been quite a few edits made to the article since 2013. So the labeling of it as being overly original source, you can see how many edits have now. A certain amount of these are bots and things like that, but there has been quite a lot of edits made to the page. So whether or not it's still relying too much on original research, maybe up for debate, basically. But we're going to press the edit button anyway, and we're going to take a look. So she's quite an interesting character. She was moved to America as a very young child, and was involved in, I suppose, the gold mining prospecting time within the States, and equally in Alaska and in Canada. So she was quite by all accounts, kind of a colourful and memorable character, which has led to her, I suppose, being written about in a folkish kind of way. An awful lot of the time there seems to be quite a lot of, I suppose, folk or myth around her to a certain extent. So one of the first things that is up for debate about her is when exactly she was born. And sources seem to differ on this. Some say 1945, some say 44, some say as late as 1849. So I'm going to qualify this a little bit. We do have our two sources here, which is, I have this one open, which does have this caveat of some say 1944 and some say 45. Let me make this a little bit bigger. I'll read it comfortably. And that one of, I suppose, the accepted authoritative biographers of her has found a baptismal record for 1945, for mid-1945, making it more likely that she was born in 45, given that children would tend to be baptised quite soon after their birth. So we're going to say Nellie Cashman was born in Middleton, County Cork, possibly in 1945. Now, saying it at the start of the Irish famine, I'm going to change the context of that a little bit, because the Irish famine is the reason that the family, or is more than likely the reason that the family emigrate, but I think we can frame that a little bit better, a little bit clearer, and a little bit more factually, possibly in 1945. So other sources give 1844 as her year of birth. So I'm going to start referencing before I completely lose track of where I'm going. So again, we're using our trusty Dictionary of Irish Biography, which corroborates an awful lot of the information that we're finding elsewhere. So we're going to say, um, we're going to actually, do you know what? We're going to say was born in County Cork we're going to go with what the DIB is, in the mid 1840s. I'm going to say some sources give 1844 as the year of her birth, while some other research indicates she was baptized on, I think we have a full date for her baptism, or her possible baptism. Anne Ellen Cashman was baptized on this date. Of course, we don't know exactly for sure. That she was the Ellen Cashman, baptized October 1945. So we're going to do two references here now. So at first, actually, I'm going to use both. So I'm going to use the Irish. So we already have the Irish Times source is already here, but I'm going to cite it again. So when you're reusing a citation, rather than putting it in from scratch, I'm going to go to reuse. And it's the miner with the heart of gold. I'll place that there. And then I'm going to add, I'm going to double check that the DIB isn't already in there. No, it's not. So we are going to add that in. So the difference between citing in this way, actually that's not where I want to put it, citing in this way as opposed to doing it in an original research sort of way. So if I was doing this as a piece of research, not for a Wikipedia article, and I was trying to find out for myself whether or not verify the date of birth for Nellie Cashman. One of the things that you could use is her gravestone. So on Find a Grave, which is not a suitable reference for Wikipedia because, again, like Wikipedia, it's crowdsourced, so it's not 100% verifiable. But there is a photograph of her tombstone, and you can see it says 1844. But we know anybody who's been engaged in any sort of historical or genealogical research, you can't always necessarily rely on a birth or a death date on a tombstone. Information gets lost, especially if somebody was an immigrant. If they're not known to the local community, nobody else was around perhaps when that person was born, nobody can corroborate it. So they're going on the word of the person, or perhaps an intelligent guess based on what age the person said that they were at the time that they died. So we have 1844 here. We have the other reference that says 1845. But I'm referencing the Irish Times article, which states the ambiguity. If it was original research, I would be sourcing my information from the tombstone or directly from the baptismal record, and that's exactly what we're not doing on Wikipedia. We're looking for those secondary sources. We're looking for the articles written about her. We're looking for her entries in the Dictionary of Irish Biography and also in the Dictionary of Canadian Biography. So you can see in Canadian Biography it says circa 1945. So again, we have this ambiguity around the information, but we're expressing the ambiguity as it exists within good quality, verifiable, reliable resources, secondary sources. Let me go back here now, and I'm going to add in my good old dictionary biography. Oh, yes. Catches me out every time. We have our author. Changes. Now, that should say mid. Actually, I can move. I think I can move this down here. Because both of those sources, and they're also backing up this sentence here. So what I'm going to add here is Nellie Cashman. I'm going to put Ellen. Just to reiterate that Nellie is a nickname of sorts. What other research indicates that she was the Ellen Cashman baptized? So that's one, I suppose, element dealt with. If we look down the body of the article, we're now seeing an awful lot of this particular tag, citation needed. And again, if you're used to reading Wikipedia, you're probably used to seeing this dotted around the place. And this is added when we have no inline citation. We have no idea where this information has come from. We have a citation up here. We have one which I think is the Dictionary of Canadian Biography. So that verifies this particular sentence here, but everything following it is unreferenced. We can't verify where this information came from, or whether or not it's accurate, or whether or not it's original research, or whether somebody has just made it up out of whole cloth. And you can see as we go down the body of the article, it starts to get kind of, we're seeing more and more of the citation needed within the body of the information around her her adult life. Again, we're seeing it down here. So what I'm going to do is, so I can see that we're going to look for a chunk that we can definitely verify. And I know that, so her sister Fanny, I think we can probably take out Cashman because they were sisters. And I think she's mentioned, so her family lived, Cashman was brought to the United States with her mother, alongside her sister Frances, known as Fanny. They settled first in Boston. That's fine. Actually, we were going to add a little bit about the Irish famine, weren't we? It's possible the family immigrated to the Irish famine. Like that. And I'm going to double check that this. Okay, so because this is an Irish paper, it's able to say the fateful year of 45, because to most Irish readers they would know what that meant. And it's in reference to the famine, but it's not explicit. I'll double check number 4. Does this say anything about her emigrating during the famine? Yes, so emigrated during the potato famine. Word of advice, Irish people never called it the potato famine. It was the Great Famine or An Gorta Mór. So that's absolutely fine. That reference is, or that sentence is backed up by those 2 references there, so I don't need to add in another one. But what we're going to do is reference the fact that she raised her sister's children after the death of her sister. So her sister Fanny Cunningham was widowed in 1881 following the death of her husband Tom, a bootmaker. Fine. Cashman arranged for Fanny and her 5 children to move to Tucson, Arizona. Fanny died of tuberculosis, leaving her children in Cashman's care. Honouring her sister's wishes, Cashman raised the children as her own. And I think if we search for Fanny, no, she only gets one mention. There, we'll see if no. Her sister's children are not mentioned there. Do we have them in? So do we have no reference to the fact that she raised her sister's children? So what year do we have here? So it was 1881, was it not? No, that's when her sister was 1884. So looking for information around her. Yes, okay, so they refer to her as Frances. Along the way, she inherited a family. That's a particular way of putting it, from her dead sister Frances. So that doesn't give us any of the information around her sister's wishes or anything like that. Check with the DIB again. There we go. Okay, so it's Fanny IE. She was joined in Tombstone in 1881 by her recently widowed sister and the latter's 5 children. Doesn't mention the sister's husband's name, so we'll have to see if we can find a reference for that. After her sister's death in 1844, she was sole support and guardian to the children. So I can take out this citation needed. Now, honouring her sister's wishes, I can probably take that out. I mean, we don't know what, none of the references are backing that up. But I can add in DIB. But this bit of information we still don't have a source for. Who Mr. Cunningham was. After the death in 1884 of her sister Frances, she acted briefly as foster mother. Briefly as foster mother. That's interesting. Of course, we don't know what briefly means here. It could be years or months. Interesting. We still have no information on... Fanny soon married and began to raise a family. However, adventurous Nellie didn't. This is just the wonderful silence of me thinking. But you can see how, especially with this article that's written and that perhaps has been, you know, it's 16 years old, it's had a lot of people write it, rewrite it, edit it. It's a slow process to kind of pull it apart and say, okay, well, what is the information that we definitely know? Again, we have when her brother-in-law died in 1881. We search for Tom. Does he come up? Yeah, Doomstone. But it doesn't look like we get a Tom. So we have two options here. I can add a citation needed, or I can just remove the bit of information. And I am inclined, because, I mean, it is a piece of information, fair enough, but whether or not it's particularly pertinent to Nellie's article, as opposed to Fanny's biography, because this article isn't about Fanny, or Nellie's nieces and nephews. So it's kind of a little bit of an extraneous piece of information, so I'm going to take it out. So the other sources do state the date that Fanny was widowed. Was widowed in 1881. So we've removed a citation needed there. One down. Another one that I found is that some of the places, so this idea that she was the angel of Cassar, and she's also referred to as kind of the angel of Tombstone. So I'm going to see if I can find something to back this up. So after 770 days of harsh weather, Cashman and her party located the sick men. So what year is this? This is in the 1870s. So let's see if we can back this up. So I do have this bit in the DIB referring to her as a miner's angel. And that seems to be from that period of time. Here we go. So while wintering in Victoria from 1874-75, she heard that loads of miners were trapped in severe weather. She purchased store provisions and hired a party of men and led a relief expedition. Does that back up what we're saying here? Located the sick men. Okay. Who numbered far more than 26. Okay, so there's bits and pieces of information here that we're not quite getting a citation for. But do we have another one that says the Angel of Cassar? This one seems, there we go. The Angel of Tombstone. Let's flick up a little bit here and see if we get some of the information that we're seeing here. Do we have an issue with close paraphrasing? Rather than November 26th. It's close. It's close. Probably not. It's not quite a copy paste. Not far off though. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this as the citation because this seems to be backing up the little bit of information. And this article does refer to as the Angel of Cassar as opposed to the Miner's Angel. So I'm going to cite. I'm going to double check that we don't already have it. Okay, Legends of America, that's her there. So we can add that in. So you can see, I mean, the Angel of Cassar again is something that seems to be mentioned on her tombstone. So it's quite possible somewhere along the way that that's where it was transcribed from, or it was found in this article but not properly cited, so therefore it starts to look a little bit like original research, and that's why there's a little bit of confusion. Although she's not referred to as the Cassar, she's the Miner's Angel, just to keep us on our toes. I did also notice that her lead section is quite long. Um, there's a possibility that this could be tidied up a little bit. That there's a little bit too much detail in it. Generally, how long a lead section is reflective of how long the actual body of the article is, and this is quite a long article, although it might become a little bit more condensed if we were to very carefully comb through it and ensure that every single line of this is actually backed up by the citation that states it, or if we can't find one with these ones that are citation needed, that it gets removed. Which, you know, it's always a little bit tough to delete information, especially if you think that quite possibly there was a good source that it came from, but you just can't find it yourself, so you can't verify it. There are two, as I said, there are two schools of thought on it: add in the citation needed or just take it out. If the citation needed has persisted for a really long time and nobody has managed to verify the information, and with this, because it has had the maintenance tags on it for so long, I would be inclined to remove the information if you can't verify it. And I think we'll possibly leave it at that for today. If anybody else feels like wading in and taking a look at Nellie, please do. As I said, she's kind of needed quite a lot of work for a while, so she could do with a little bit of TLC. It's probably long overdue, given the amount that's written about her now. And you can see in the further reading section, those, I suppose, authoritative biographies are mentioned as part of the reading list, but they're not, or as the further reading, they're not actually used as citations within the body of the article. So to get this article to a really good, high standard, rather than looking for these online resources, which are fine when you're starting off, but if you're trying to do the little bit of deep dive that this article in particular is trying to do, you're really going to need those long texts to really get it going. So if you think about the types of articles on Wikipedia that are going to be quite long and have lots and lots of citations, so you know, the Oscar Wildes, the W.B. Yeats, the Bernard Shaws of this world, but equally Picasso or Charlotte Bronte, something like that. Those articles are going to have used, yes, an awful lot of these online resources, and yes, the dictionaries of biography, but they're also going to have used kind of authoritative biographies that have been written about these people over the years, and that's probably what this article is missing. If you were to read a comprehensive biography of her, you could probably pull out all the different pages where these things are mentioned, and start adding some more detailed types of references that add in footnotes. So when we're talking about where the information is ambiguous, you know, there's ambiguity there, rather than it being in the body of the text, much like in an academic work, you'd add a footnote and state, you know, certain sources say this, other sources say that, or say this is where this author conflicts with other sources on this. So it's when it starts to get to quite a long article that you're starting to get into more and more of that functionality that allows more nuance and more information to be built in as part of the infrastructure of it. So we're going to say add our new citation, which is the DIB. Removed some uncited information. I'm going to say publish. So for my half an hour of work, probably not a huge amount of edits, but I hope what the changes that I made sense, and that you followed along as we discussed the idea of original research, and hopefully sometime soon one of us will be able to remove this maintenance tag from Nellie, as she well and sorely deserves at this point. So I haven't decided exactly what I'm going to explore at the next session. If somebody has any suggestions that they'd like to make, I'd love to hear it. Otherwise, I might start, I'll continue going through some of the elements of the manual of style, some of the guidelines around editing articles, that kind of thing. But I'd love to hear your suggestions. So I'm going to take a few days off for Easter, and I hope everybody has a fantastic holiday, whatever they're celebrating or nothing. And I will see you back on Tuesday at 7 o'clock. And it'll be a surprise what we're dealing with. Okay? I'll talk to you soon. Bye.